I mean, look, the ECHR stuff, you might be surprised to know, I've got a raised eyebrow about the ECHR. Personally, I don't really buy this argument that like, if we weren't in the ECHR, we'd just be like Russia and Belarus or whatever. It's like the HRA came in 98 and we were signatory in the 50s, but like there
But
was,
surely people who are seeking
right.
to abolish the ECHR would be seeking to abolish the HRA, because that's
they'll repeal it. They'd have to repeal. Yeah, they'd have to repeal it, right?
So you're backing like the Reformed British Bill of Rights.
The thing, I'm just saying that like I'm not.
Abolish the Human Rights Act doesn't quite have the same ring as
Yeah.
No, but this is part of the this is the part of the reason, right? That people don't want to. People are really squeamish about it because its branding is fucking brilliant. like European Court of Human, you're against all man rights. You ever seen that? You remember that thing from World's Strictest Parents? Yeah. We are in the Barbados right now. Do you know what I'm saying? We've got to try and execute some rules. So that's why I'm kind of going with the ECHR.
When telly was telly.
Exactly. You know, you're staying up late at night on night. Yeah, come on.
Yeah.
So my thing with the ECHR, I'm not necessarily all the way out on like we should leave, but I think that it might be in need of reform. And yeah, like the reason I want to like, I need to explain this a little bit more because it sounds fucking mental, but the problem we've got, as I said earlier, is there's 100% salience on every negative story about immigration, right? Every single time something bad happens to do with immigration, the Daily Mail, the Sun, all of the right-wing press, tabloid press, plus all of the people who are like online communicators, Sargon of Akkad and, you know, who are Connor Tomlinson and all of these other people, they make sure that every single one of those stories is amplified to the max. True or false?
Yeah.
Yeah, true, right? So
neither of those people are a big fan of me, by the way.
Okay, well, I don't imagine they know who I am, but I'm not a big fan of them either.
One of them really knows who I am, actually. One of them went on a date with someone and spoke about me the entire time.
Fucking hell, he's obsessed.
Yeah.
He's obsessed. I understand. But still, like, I just think that basically what we can't do as the left is say in the face of those stories, we don't care about those things. That's part of the reason why people think that we're like mental open border people, is because they hear about that Brazilian guy who was a fucking child rapist in Brazil, who escaped being sentenced, came to this country, committed, was a paedophile here, and then they can't deport him because of the states of Brazilian jails. Like, I'm sorry, that is just fucking insane. Like, if that person is resisting being deported because of invoking the ECHR, that is why we're losing people, some normal, sensible people on the lines of immigration who aren't racist. People want to be able to deport those people, and I agree with them.
Well, Keir Starmer said before Labour conference something interesting about the ECHR, which I think kind of maybe got lost in the pre-conference run-up. But he wasn't saying that we should abolish it, obviously. But he was saying we should relook at how Article 3 and Article 8 are applied, which is the right to be freedom from torture and the right to a family life. Because he said these are the two articles that are being used the most to stop what otherwise would be seen as quite legitimate deportations. And they brought up that example because he was saying that prisons are worse quality in Brazil than they are in the UK. But Keir Starmer's point is like, actually probably most prisons in the world are worse quality than the UK.
We really need to get to the core of this, because I think this is what the mad thing is. Like, so if you're a paedophile or a rapist, because you've committed that act in this country, that makes you more at risk of being attacked in a foreign jail.
Yeah.
So if you commit that act, you then have greater powers under the ECHR to resist deportation. That's where we've got to with the application of the ECHR. That to me just seems absolutely mad and insane. The ECHR was a living instrument, right? It was created to be applied to different contexts depending on their time, right? It's clear. If the ECHR, this is what often the argument I hear on the left, and I think it's compelling to a certain degree, right? ECHR was brought about because we learned the lessons of World War II and we want to resist fascism. Absolutely on board with that mission. Let's resist fascism. Do we think currently the way the world is working and the way the UK is right now, that the ECHR's application in its current form is stopping the rise of fascism? It's literally fueling them. They are seeing this as a button to press to keep on getting media attention on it, because we're getting skewered on it.
I think it's a dangerous argument, because I think that could open the gateway to a race to the bottom. I understand the right to a family life, and I think that is that is the most difficult component, I would say, probably, of all of those articles, because
That's
there
great.
have been absolutely extraordinary cases. I mean, there was one man who'd committed just unspeakably heinous crimes, and he was allowed to stay in the country because he had a young son who, if they all went back to his country of quote unquote origin, his son is a vegetarian and he wouldn't be able to access vegetarian food.
It's-
And it was
Right,
extraordinary.
right.
And that was contested under Right to a Family Life. So yeah, there are these flagrant, anomalous examples. I just worry that I worry that it becomes a race to the bottom, because you can't sort of look at the rest of the world and say, well, everyone else is fascistic right now. So I suppose we can engage in a little bit of fascism as well.
That's not
Do you know
that's,
what I mean?
that's not my argument. My argument is that
Anyway, that's all that we've got time for.
Calling freelancers, small and mid-sized business owners. Tide's Instant Saver account offers up to 4% AER variable, flexible access and competitive returns.
Unlike other options on the market, you won't need to hold your money with Tide for a fixed period. That means you'll have instant access and free withdrawals whenever you need it.
You can get started today with just £1, making it easy to start growing your business savings.
Want to know what you'll earn? Tide's clever calculator gives you a clear picture up front.
Our audience will receive £100 cash back when you deposit £5,000 within the first 30 days of opening your Tide Instant Saver account.
Use code JOE, that's J-O-E, JOE. New members receive an annual equivalent rate of up to 4% AER variable, free for 6 months. For the full offer, visit tide.co/Joe. T's and C's apply.
my argument is that in the current formulation of the ECHR, there is a sense that people are essentially able to avoid the kind of legal consequences that we expect our judiciary to be able to bring about. And this is dovetailing with so many other things that I think are fueling and are part of the right-wing narrative that has really reshaped politics in not just this country, but wider recently, which is the sense that, we don't have sovereignty and we don't have control, right? There is, Lord Sumption would make an argument about like supranational above the national controls in like a court in Strasbourg being something that's taking away from parliamentary sovereignty. And, Lord Sumption is right wing broadly, but so did Clement Attlee. This was the argument of the original Labour Party in the late 1940s was to be against the ECHR because it was actually brought about by a conservative pro-markets movement in Europe. So they were saying, hold on, this thing here could exercise a level of control over and above what we have through parliamentary sovereignty, the will to enact the most revolutionary socialist program in this country's ever seen. And so their concern was about sovereignty. And I think obviously the way in which the kind of the conversation around Europe has changed and allegiances have switched sides over time has been really interesting. And Tom McTague's written a really great book on this, Between the Waves, which kind of documents all of these things. But I think there is something right now in that sense that, okay, let's try and learn a bit about what the right are doing effectively in this comms environment. What are they tapping into? They're tapping into a sense that we don't have a sense of control over our parliament. Like we don't. You have a massive majority and you can't even pass these bills, and that is compounding people's sense that politics is broken and that we don't live in a democracy. And I think that's really concerning, actually. I think that, my co-host Javan ran against Nigel Farage in Clacton. Javan is like more left-wing than I am in many ways. He wants to leave. He's more further away from me than the ECHR because of that Clement Attlee style, understanding of popular sovereignty. Is that if the people give you the will to do something, you should just exact that will. And I think his experience, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think campaigning in Clacton, he saw firsthand with these people who just had a sense that the government do not care about what I want and what I want to do. And there is obviously an argument on the other side to say that the ECHR leaving or reforming, which I'm a fan of, the ECHR, it's not going to solve all these problems around illegal immigration. I'm not suggesting for a moment that it will, but I think there's something about we need to kill off as many of those sorts of stories of those sorts of people, anomalous stories, sure, but we need to make sure that there are fewer and fewer and fewer, i.e. zero of those stories, because that's not just ultimately.
I think that it's a domino, right? So if you pull out of the ECHR, there are still other mechanisms that
I'm
you
not saying
could
pull it out.
argue.
Reform.
Okay, if you reform the ECHR, there are still other mechanisms with which the judiciary could be arguably controlled by a quote unquote foreign court.
Strasbourg, yeah.
I do think that it's a domino, and I do think that it's a red herring that I think the left should avoid the sort of the public scrutiny of. Behind the scenes, perhaps you do reform the ECHR, but I think getting into a public conversation about it, and I think Starmer getting embroiled into the ins and outs of the sort of the anomalies that we were talking about, of how terrible this is, we must reform it, I think will only embolden reform. I cannot see
There's 100%
a
risk.
win for Labour.
Do you not think what Keir Starmer is proposing, just to change like the legal application and interpretation, do you not think that goes far enough?
I think that sounds about right to me. You know, people say that Article 8 and Article 3 are really woolly, and that's part of the reason it's not being applied properly. It's not determinate enough. Look, I'm not a legal scholar, right? These are just some thoughts that I've been kind of mulling around in my head about this sort of stuff. I would love to see Keir embrace his background more. You know, I think part of the issue that Labour have had, and he has had specifically in communications, is that Keir Starmer's been learning on the job, you know, his entire political career. He actually is, in a time of anti-politics, an anti-politics politician, right? He was a DPP, he was a civil servant. He's an international lawyer. You know, what we're talking about here is international law. You know, if anyone can try and find a sensible route to plot on this, I think he's the person to be able to do that. Now, a lot of people think that he's exhausted all of his political capital, so this might not be possible. But I think he needs to tap into that sense of who he really is. And one of the things I was saying in defense of his conference speech, for instance, was that was the best time he's ever communicated, because it was actually like, this actually is your politics. You know, you actually are against reform. And going back to the grievance stuff, you know, I think that there's no way you can avoid having an enemy in this current world of politics. And reform is our enemy. You know, we have to say that it's, you know, it is, in my view, corporate greed, billionaire interests, you know, people who don't believe in the state, who we're up against. We believe in the state, ultimately. That's what it means to be on the left.
You need to make that argument more in a more compelling fashion, because at the moment it just sort of seems like the prevailing narrative is Labour is pro-immigration, Farage is anti-immigration. You know what I mean? There's no... I don't think that the billionaire argument is cutting through.
No, but that's why the Greens have been so effective. And this is where I will give the Greens and Gary Stevenson in particular credit. You know, the right build their coalition out from immigration. They start from immigration. Come on in, join us. A few of you are racist. Don't mind. You're not racist. Come on, we'll put you at the front. So that's where their starting position is. And then they build out from there. Where are we starting from? Ultimately, most people that went into left-wing politics did it because, I think, or at least because they're concerned about inequality. Gary Stevenson has shown in this communications environment that you can raise the salience of inequality. Now, I don't personally believe in instituting a wealth tax on our own. I think it's naive. I think if you want to have a wealth tax, you have to be serious about capital flight. The only way you're going to do that is through multilateralism and unfortunately through the US. So we need to make the wealth tax a big conversation in the US. That should be where the focus is. But what he's done is he's shown that inequality can be the starting place for a left-wing movement. And I'm with that. You know, that's where I think we can build our coalition. The problem is that for now, it's kind of seen, inequality, I think, is still seen by some parts of Labour establishment as being like, that's not what we're about. We're about aspiration and opportunity. But I think if history is a guide on this sort of stuff, when you have a level of overproduced elites, GDP just going up to the top 1%, really poor levels of redistribution, a sclerotic state, you know, there's just so many problems that we can list that opportunity is like a mirage. And I think actually now what we need to go and really zero in on is that inequality piece.
Thanks to Tide and their instant savings account for sponsoring this week's podcast.
New members receive an annual equivalent rate of up to 4% AER variable.
Our audience will receive £100 cash back when you deposit £5,000 within the first 30 days of opening your Tide Instant Saver account.
Use code JOE. For the full offer, visit tide.co/Joe. T's and C's apply.